welcome. Hit the like button, hit the bell, hit subscribe, share the show. You guys have been excellent at that. Thank you for listening. This is Joey. Let's get started. Now, I've been waiting a few days for this to simmer and settle because this is a very hot, sizzling, grease popping off the bacon type of story. And that's this Uvalde shooting in Texas. And the reason why I've been letting it simmer for a little bit is I believe I told you a couple episodes ago, the way that information comes out during a big spectacle event like this, you have to wait a few days because the information has to catch up with the event, right? The first news that you hear on a big news event, especially one involving the police and a police shooting and all that kind of stuff, usually the first pieces of information that you hear are either exaggerated, downplayed, or in some way complete bullshit, especially, as you can see now with this case, especially when there are official statements left out by the police. You have to let the information settle to where the bullshit gets evaporated, the real shit gets verified, and you have a real idea of what happens and how people are reacting to it. Another thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to big events like this is how the people in charge will bend to the will of the people and the people's reaction, right? The court of public opinion is all powerful. So here's what I mean. You have, for those of you who've been under a rock as of late, and if you have been under a rock, I understand why. But for those of you who have been under a rock as of late in America, there was a gruesome shooting in a city called Uvalde, Texas, at an elementary school in which upwards of 20 very young children were shot up by some crazy person with an AR-15. This guy, as we're learning as the story develops, was allowed to do this despite police being on the scene, a heavy amount of police, 19 police officers from the local school district's police department were on the scene and did nothing. This guy was able to kill 20 little kids in a school, despite the police, as we're learning, as the story develops, engaged him before he got into the school. Now, what we're still finding out as the story develops is, one, how in the fuck did he get into the school in the first place? And why in the fuck didn't police engage this guy once he got into the school? And what people are getting, and by people, I mean white people. This does not involve black people. We have not gotten to the Buffalo shooting yet. What white people are learning from this event with regards to the police is a few jarring facts. First jarring fact that white folks are learning about the police is that the police are not legally obligated to protect you. They're not legally obligated to do shit for you, which is coming to white people as a bit of a surprise because white people up until this point were under the understanding or the belief that that's literally what the police were for, right? So now you've got this situation to where you're realizing that the police aren't really there to protect you, despite walking around with badges that literally say protect and serve, right? Doesn't say protect and serve you, just says protect and serve. Read the fine print. Another thing that white society is learning about their police is that their police will put much effort into beating the shit out of people that are largely unarmed and defenseless. Now, what was the reason for why the Uvalde police did not engage this mass shooter, even as he was killing a bunch of innocent children or a bunch of children? The reason was they didn't want to get shot. 19 police officers, armed to the teeth, sitting there right at the scene of the crime where they could easily prevent something, well, not easily, but could prevent something, and they're scared. After all this mashing and moaning and mashing of teeth, they finally admitted they were scared. Right? Now, what are the odds that this one particular police department happens to get all of the fraidy cats in America? Gone officially. And I want to make sure we keep record of this because, like Neely Fuller said, white supremacy often takes both sides of an argument, right? This Uvalde shooting should silence any more talk of good guys with guns. This Uvalde shooting should silence any talk of gun control. Because this Uvalde shooting seemed like a literal advertisement for the Second Amendment. You know, taking the law into your own hands to defend yourself. And I'm not talking about vigilantism. I'm talking about just defending yourself or defending your loved ones. There used to be an adage for calling the police. And it was, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And it's saying that even the most well-meaning cop, simply by matter of logistics, probably can't help to save split-second problems that could probably be more easily saved with a gun. Let me give you some details of how this whole shooting is starting to go down now that we're finding out all the facts. See, because what the police department tried to do at first was give everybody gag orders and put them on silence and then tell their official story. They even tried to throw one of the teachers under the bus and say that the reason that the shooter got in was because the teacher left the door open, left a rock by the door. That turned out to be a lie. As a matter of fact, let me just start from the top. It's been proven by factual evidence, documentation, and recordings the following. The suspect in the shooting had first come on the scene after crashing his grandmother's car or truck near a funeral home. We learned later on, after the fact, that he had obtained this vehicle after shooting his grandmother in the face. He drove, crashed into a funeral home, where he was then met by members of the funeral home to see if he was okay. At this point, they thought it was a regular car crash. He began instantly drawing his weapon and firing at the people of the funeral home, who hastily retreated. The man who ran the funeral parlor then called his wife on the phone, requested that she get his gun, and he had opted to engage this guy himself, where he then chased the guy off to the school. At the time of the engagement, prior to the engagement, sometime between calling his wife and engaging the guy, he also called the police. He warned the police, hey, there's a shooter that's over here by the funeral parlor. Oh, by the way, we're right by the school. You should warn the school. And I'm laying all this down to show you that this is a situation where the citizens did everything right. The citizens did everything right. They called their police like they're supposed to do. The police arrived on the scene within a few minutes. And according to the police, initially, they had engaged the suspect, but somehow he made it into the school. At the time, it was being purported that the way he made it into the school was by a door that was negligently left open by a teacher. However, according to facts, recordings, and documentation of the incident, the teacher was able to prove on camera that she not only closed the door and locked it before the assailant was able to get inside. Therefore, she's not the reason he got in. She was not only able to prove on camera that she did close the door, but the school was able to prove that the doors are on a system that automatically locks when closed. So there goes that theory. according to eyewitness reports from parents that were on the scene. Despite pleads and begging and chiding from parents that were right there on the scene, the police refused to go in. In fact, when other police departments showed up on the scene, now I want you to keep in mind, the Uvalde Police Department that's in question that made the decisions that we don't like, they are part of the Uvalde School District. They're part of that particular school's school district police department. They have been known for being kind of bumbling, stumbling Keystone cops. But when an incident went down, as is protocol, other neighboring larger police departments were called in. Sheriffs were called in. But they were all told to stand down by this particular department. The reason being at the time, see, when you make up a lie, you got to make up support lies to keep that one lie up, right? It's not just one lie and you're done. People will come back around the corner with more questions, which will require more lies. At the time, it was being told that the reason the police were standing off and not engaging and not pursuing or trying to go in was because the shooting situation had turned into a hostage situation. However, there's no documented evidence of either the assailant nor any police members attempting to communicate or negotiate with said shooter. All they heard was him shooting people. He didn't want to negotiate. We're getting reports that there were repeated calls from children inside the school trying to get away from the shooter, calling police, calling their parents. We're being told, and this is proven, that police would have the kids shout for help so that they knew where they were, and then the kids would get shot by the shooter. Worse yet, we have reports and recordings that the police actually may have shot one or more children by mistake. And what we're seeing now, what we do know also was that parents who were attempting to go in and rescue their children by themselves, upon realizing that the police were not going to engage the shooter no matter what, parents that attempted to rescue their children were tackled, tased, maced, arrested, handcuffed, detained by said police that would not use that same macho force to engage the shooter. You know, someone that had a gun just like them. Worse yet, we're now hearing that Uvalde police threatened and are actively threatening members of the media for releasing information about said incident. The chief of police for that department, who was going to be promoted to city council, this ceremony and this process we were told was going to be held back while this incident's under investigation. And instead, the city council just quietly promoted him onto the council without ceremony. This is a few days ago. As this information trickles out, see, the name of the game when you're dealing with a scandal is to run out the clock. You know, people's attention is fleeting. And as bad as something like this is, there'll be a new shooting on the news tomorrow, and the world will divert its attention. So they were really banking on people just eventually forgetting about something like this. But this is a story that's become so sensationalized and so egregious that it's making white folks wonder, what is the purpose of the police? Remember, just a few weeks ago, the media was trying to push a narrative that we were under the grips of some crushing crime wave that could only be solved with an influx of police. This was police propaganda. There is no crime wave. Is there an uptick in crime? Yeah, but a crime wave makes it sound like there's some Batman villain that escaped Arkham Asylum that's directing everything. No, you have a little bit more chaos because you got less people with money. It's not exactly rocket science. And you've never had the numbers. This is the deep, dark secret of policing. You've never had the numbers to completely control society. That's why you've always staffed your police forces and you've always organized your policing strategy around deterrence. When you see black folks getting hemmed up for there being a broken glass in the neighborhood, or niggas getting beaten up for jaywalking, or looking funny, or stop and frisk, those things don't do anything to deter or prevent or stop crime. And that's not what their purposes are. Their purpose is to intimidate for the object of deterrence. Don't even think. So I guess you could argue that it prevents. But that's never been proven. It's like a scarecrow. But as we know with scarecrows, the second one crow is brave enough to land on that scarecrow's shoulder and see that that scarecrow can't move, next thing you know, that scarecrow just becomes a post where crows live. It didn't scare anybody. And the police are no different. You can put a couple of cops in a black neighborhood every now and then, have them kill a black person. Same way they do a deer to kind of send a message to the other animals in the area. Kind of leave the carcass out there. You know how they did with Mike Brown. You could do that every now and then. It scares people. For a while. But see, white folks are starting to realize that's all the police are really good for. If something really breaks off with an actual crazy person, see, it's easy to shake down black folks who aren't really criminals. It's easy to fight crime when all you're doing. It's easy to fight crime when all you're doing is beating up random defenseless people and then arbitrarily labeling them as criminals afterwards, right? But when you got to go face a real criminal, someone that really comes out of a comic book, a psychopath with an AR-15 shooting up little kids. Now all of a sudden you're like, but I can get shot. Yeah, you're a cop. That's why we gave you a vest. What are you talking about? And this isn't the first time this has happened. This has happened to white kids in Florida with the police resource officer right there on the scene with a mass shooter. You got an AR-15 just like him. You got a vest just like him. All that these colors don't run training and thin blue line. That thin blue line got real thin. Snapped and disappeared. Because you're not trying to deal with somebody that doesn't respect your badge or your gun. If I got a gun just like you, the hell's that badge going to do? I'm a psychopath. 19 dudes versus one. The 19 stand down. The 19 divert back to what their real job is, which is being muscleheads and living walls, and they get to blocking and beating up the parents. Now, when spectacle happens, every other organized political group knows how to take advantage of spectacle and turn the narrative towards action for their political group or demographic. Asian woman gets pushed into the train tracks. There's going to be an anti-Asian hate bill getting passed because there's Asian political power. Gay person gets stabbed on the subway. There's going to be some anti-gay hate group movement that is going to get some power because now they know how to take that spectacle and turn it into a narrative of political action. White folks was just about believing refund the police, an effort made by the Democratic and Republican Party to try to get the police back in the good graces with white folks. Now, white folks can tolerate some racism. You know they can tolerate some anti-black racism. White folks can tolerate some incompetence. But white folks will not tolerate straight up cowardice and covering up from their police when it affects them directly. And this is making white folks realize, see, this wasn't just a Uvalde police thing. When you got the police departments literally citing, there is no law saying we have to protect you. Now, what do white people say about cops' salaries all the time? My taxes pay your salaries. White folks will tell a cop that while being pulled. Hey, my taxes pay your salary, asshole. They'll tell a cop that while being pulled over. So now you got white folks. This ain't got nothing to do with black people. Seriously asking themselves, if you're not obligated to protect me, what the hell am I paying you for? Why do we see, there's a bit of an unwritten rule. There's a social contract between society and society's policing forces that says we tolerate a lot of the weird shit you do so you can get the job done that you need to get done. But if you're not doing that job, why are we tolerating this shit? White society tolerates racial injustice from the police under the understanding that if you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. They're largely cool with their police forces being trigger happy muscleheads that beat the shit up out of black people because we think that's what's going to keep us safe as a white society. But if we hear that you wouldn't go in there because you're scared, what's the point of you at this point? We give you vest. We give you top of the line military equipment. Look at all that shit they broke out with in Ferguson. It looked like an episode of G.I. Joe. You guys got spy equipment. You guys got all this top-notch paramilitary gear. But you scared by one guy with an AR-15. What do you think all the other crazy people with AR-15s are? They're all doing the Birdman hand rub right now. And again, the Uvalde Police Department is far from the only department that does this. Most of these police departments do this when there's a mass shooting. They don't want to go in. They don't want to engage. And look at the domino effect this has on society. You can't sit there and say in one breath, the police are not legally obligated to protect you. Again, we're not talking about this police department did some cowardly shit, but then all the other police departments are like, shame on these bitches. We would have went in there and did X, Y, Z. We take this role very seriously. We don't do blah, 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 blah. You're not talking about the police department saying we're not obligated to protect you, and then society going, oh, that's bullshit. We need to add a law that clarifies that the police are definitely there to protect and serve. We're talking about the police telling you, pointing out a long known rule that we're not obligated to protect you. And white folks sit back going, yeah, we know. Because deep down, you know they're not there to protect you. They're there to protect policy. They're policy enforcement. They're law enforcement. Now, last time I checked, committing murder was against the law. So you would think they would enforce that law. But they found some wiggle room and said, you're not the important party in this agreement, which makes white folks wonder, what do we pay you fuckers for? If you're not obligated to protect us, and your job is to just go home and be safe, which is fine, that's your prerogative, then we don't need you having all these high-powered rifles. We don't need you having grenade launchers and all this extra shit. What do you need level 4 and level 3 plates for? Just go home. Just disengage. You're not obligated to protect us, so you don't need all this equipment that was given to you under the assumption that you were obligated to protect us. Let's scale all this shit down. Let's make police departments back to Andy Griffith level, since you're only able to provide Andy Griffith level of service. This is white. This ain't got shit to do with black people. That's why I said we haven't mentioned the Buffalo shooting. The Buffalo shooting didn't have a squadron of police on deck saying it's scary in there. See, you got to understand, deep down, white folks don't respect police neither. And I'm talking about right-wing white folks that wear American flags with blue lines on them and shit. They don't really respect police neither, but they understand that police are a means to an end. You don't believe me? Look at January 6th. January 6th was every back the blue, no matter who, thin blue line, support your local police department person you could find. It was a whole bunch of Wolford Brimley mustaches and goddamn cutoff shirts from Sturgis motorcycle events. It was the whitest, most right-wing event you could find. And what were they doing? They were beating the shit out of police with flags, chanting USA. They were smashing police in doorways. They were chasing them up the stairs. They didn't give two shits about that badge. They didn't give two shits about that thin blue line. The police were no longer a means to an end in that moment. They were in the way, and they had no hesitation to mowing them fuckers down. None. And the reason why is because they understand what the police are for. The police are supposed to be their guard dogs and upholders of white society. And as long as you do that, they're fine. They don't care if you don't rescue that cat from that tree or if you don't save that person that's bleeding out. That's not your job. Your job is to keep us protected from these niggers. Lyndon B. Johnson already told you, this is the most poignant thing that man ever said. All you got to do to keep white folks distracted from the fact that we're stealing directly from their pocket is to keep them focused on them being better than the niggers. That's the purpose of racism. I'm going to keep you so focused on hating them niggers over there that you're never going to realize that I'm the rich white man. I'm the one picking the poor white man's pockets. You're going to always look at those niggers over there. You know, that's the point of racism, right? Is to keep tricking white folks. And people say that like that's supposed to make you not be mad at white folks being racist at you no more until you realize, okay, but why does it work? It's because you don't like niggers, right? Right. If you weren't already a racist, that trick wouldn't work on you. Like, hey, man, look at those niggers over there stealing your money. And you go, I don't hate black folks. You're a rich robber baron. You're a rich tycoon. You're stealing my money. This ain't got nothing to do with black people. It wouldn't work on you unless you already had that hatred in your heart. So nice trying to get out of it with that shit. But that's really what it is. And your hatred for niggers all this time has kept you distracted from the fact that these police don't really work for you. You thought they worked for you because you like to see niggers get knocked over. You like to see niggers get troubled on. You like to see niggas get bothered and harassed. And as long as you saw that, you thought the system was working. You can't get mad at white folks. You can't get mad at police white folks because they didn't protect your kids in the school because you're just now realizing that they ain't shit when you've been cool with police stopping and frisking random black people simply for being black. You've known and were cool. This is why I laugh when you hear white folks talking about Second Amendment rights and our amendment, our Constitution. But then you'll see blatantly open violations of the Constitution happen to people that aren't in your demographic in your country, and you'll be fine with it. If you're really such a libertarian, constitutional, this, that, you should be livid with the idea of a stop and frisk, because that violates illegal search and seizure. You can't stop somebody as soon as they come out their house and hey, let me go ahead and check you for weapons. Like it's an airport check. No, get the fuck out of here. And if stop and frisk started happening to everybody in New York, regardless of who you were, there is no looking suspicious. You being in this presence makes you automatically a suspect. We got to stop you and frisk you. The second you started seeing a few too many white women getting stopped and frisked, the second you see a few too many older white men on their way to business trips in New York getting stopped and frisked, that would be the end of stop and frisk. Because we would recognize stop and frisk for what it is, which is a violation of your amendments. It's a illegal search and seizure. But we know it largely happens to black people. We'll have the report saying this disproportionately affects, meaning it only happens to niggas, right? And you'll be cool with it. There'll be no outrage. There'll be no talk from the constitutional crowd. No nothing. All you Second Amendment people, y'all sat there real goddamn quiet. I'm still waiting for the NRA's statement on Philando Castile. Still nothing. And I can't just blame the NRA, the organization, because there's a lot of you Second Amendment zealots. I'm a gun advocate. I'm a gun user. I'm a gun owner. I go to the range. I see these Second Amendment 2A people all day with their Aero Precision shirts. You know what I'm saying? And their Glock stickers on their F-150s. But none of y'all was outraged at the gross violation of your constitutional rights by Philando Castile being shot. You saw the video. You saw what happened. Y'all came from across the country to support Cliven Bundy. But imagine, y'all was all up in arms, riding every single step of the way for Kyle Rittenhouse's bitch ass. But y'all was silent on Philando Castile. That shows me what y'all tolerate. And with this police, it's no different. Y'all been cool. Y'all been cool with stop and frisk. Y'all been cool with the police shooting up. The police directly shooting up our kids on camera. Y'all saw what happened to Tamir Rice. Y'all saw that shit. Wasn't nobody hesitant to engage. The cop that shot Tamir Rice on camera for having a toy gun, he's in a whole nother police department. He didn't miss not one single check. Y'all were cool with that shit. But as soon as that shit come home to your kids, now all of a sudden, oh my God, what are the police even? You been known the police was on this shit. You been known the police was on this shit. But you've been cool with it because the police have been doing the job you've always wanted them for, which is keeping those niggers over there. Y'all ever heard of a living fence? Like when you don't want to put up a wood plank fence, you buy a bunch of like cedar plants or some shit. You know what I'm saying? You buy a bunch of English laurels and shit like that, and they grow and they become a living fence of trees between you and your neighbor. The police are like a living fence that keeps the black side of town from the white side of town. That's what they do. But when you got a real shooter in the house, they become completely inept. And even had the nerve to try to play the same inept game that they play with us. See, normally when the cops get caught doing misconduct, or the police get caught being negligent or inept or corrupt in any way, the big repercussion is more police funding. They can always bumble themselves into a bag, right? They'll mess around. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot we were supposed to actually help people. And what they'll get is sensitivity training. They'll get training, and that training costs money. Everybody wins when there's training. There's people on deck that get government contracts for providing mandatory training to the police departments. And they come in. We all have had them jobs where every now and then, every year, You got to watch a videotape on sexual harassment in the workplace or something so that you can be in compliance. I'm using the 2-finger air quotes for compliance. Nobody cares about that shit. You're just doing the quota so that you can sign off and say, we're in compliance. I did my HIPAA training. I got my food handler's permit. That's what sensitivity training is for the police. They got to sit in on a video and sign off that they watched it and that they acknowledged it. That's what you get for letting 20 kids get killed in a school. See, normally they get away with it by saying they need more training. They need better equipment. They need more funding. And they tried that shit with this Uvalde school shooting. And then the truth started coming out. That you niggas just stood down. That y'all had your rifles in your hand. You was sitting there shaking like leaves. That a lot of you guys shooting drill numbers, a lot of you guys shooting drill stats are shit because you guys do accuracy by volume. See, that's the part they don't want to talk about. They don't want to admit that a lot of them police officers can't shoot. They're not sharpshooters like that. And if they would have went in, they would have shot everything in that direction. The shooter, the kids, everything. They call it accuracy by volume. Just keep shooting, you'll hit something. And they weren't ready to deal with that. Incompetence up and down the board. And we can't just blame this local police department because what else do we know about this case? FBI was on the scene, which is weird. Why would FBI be already on the scene for a school shooting in the middle of nowhere? Like, how was FBI there? That just seems really weird. That FBI was on the scene and still nobody engaged. So that would almost mean that was the FBI's call to say nobody go help these kids. But again, that's a different story. That opens up a whole bunch of speculation and tinfoil hats. But sticking with the facts that we know, FBI was on the scene. Many police departments were on the scene. There was more engagement with the parents of those kids and more enforcement on the parents of those kids than the shooter himself. And this has left white people, not black folks, white people, wondering, what do we pay these people for? Who do they protect and serve? What is the purpose of giving these people military equipment? See, normally it's okay to say these weapons have no place in the street and they should be for police and military personnel. Okay, military personnel, we understand. We know what they do with these things. But what are the police using these for? If they're not using them for these exact situations where they're needed. If you're still going to go, hey, we're not obligated to do nothing. We were scared for our own lives. I'm not going to pay big tax money. See, now at this point, it's a matter of ROI. It's a matter of return on investment. Why would I pay for you to have top-notch equipment and top-notch weapons that you're not going to use to protect my life? If you're going to stand out here like some bitches and be scared, y'all can stand out here like some bitches and be scared with a couple of Taurus 38 specials. We can just call in real security. We can go ahead and call in the SWAT team, and they're armed to the gills and armored up to the gills, and they're ready to go in there. Now let's move forward to black people. Like I said earlier, when spectacle happens with other groups that have a political presence, that have leadership, they are able to, the name of the game in politics, one of the tactics to getting what you want is transforming spectacle, large-scale events that all the people that are watching are paying attention to, and using narrative during that spectacle to your argument to get political action. I just told you how Asians were able to string together sparse crimes against Asians for random things. Asians starting fights and getting their ass kicked. Asians showing up drunk somewhere and getting shooed off somewhere. They were able to take all that disparate information and turn it into a narrative that there is concerted, consistent anti-Asian sentiments in this country after COVID that we need compensation for. That's how they were able to do it. It wasn't that hard. If you're able to show, hey, this is the problem based on what we're seeing, this is what we want as a solution based on what we feel, and this is how many people feel this way, and oh, by the way, isn't the election coming up? You could stop nigger hate in 3 days. We don't do it. We don't have leadership. We leave it to Al Sharpton, and he directs the money to his church that doesn't exist. We leave it to Patricia Cooliers or whatever from Black Lives Matter, and they steal the money and go buy real estate and stock options. Tamir Rice's mama don't never see a dime. Mike Brown's family don't ever see a dime. Right now, white folks have soured on the idea of funding the police. Not because of racial injustice, not because of wokeness, but because of, like I said, a matter of ROI, a matter of return on investment. You beating up some niggers and slapping them around and keeping them on the black side of town is cool and all, but it's not worth the tax dollars you're charging us. The tax dollars that we pay you, that's for go get my kids out of that school shooting money. We pay you to protect our kids. We pay you to protect our families. You can't make an argument. So you can't make a better Second Amendment gun rights advocate argument than literally showing regular white people. I bet you not a one of them white folks had a gun. I bet you not a one of them white folks believed in owning a gun. Which is weird because it's Texas. Let's just assume they're all California transplants. They're all Beto O'Rourke's kids, right? And they're all down there in Uvalde, Texas, where they've trusted the system to protect them, where they've trusted professionals and police and law enforcement officers to protect the law, property, and people. And they've seen that fail them right before their eyes. We've seen that when they got desperate and said, I'll just go in, even if I'll just go in and get my kids and myself, you've seen that law enforcement that's supposed to be there to protect you, protecting their badge, protecting their reputation, and low key, in a way, protecting the shooter. You've seen the funeral parlor owner say on air, I wish I would have had my gun. I feel guilty. I stood by and I couldn't do anything. He was shooting at our windows and I couldn't do nothing. I wish I would have had my gun on me. Do you think parents who had to sit there and listen to their kids be killed from outside the school while the police did nothing? The mom that got handcuffed trying to go get her babies, that they unhandcuffed, that she ran in and got her babies herself, that was able to say, I went all in and through the school during the active shooting. There were no policemen inside the building. Thus, yet again, busting up another lie from the police. Do you think any of the parents that were there at that event that had to go through that, do you think they're going to walk away with a healthy respect for the police department and law enforcement? Or do you think they're going to be thinking, I need to get a firearm to protect myself? I can't depend on anybody but myself to protect myself and my family. Do you know how many people who have watched this story have went out and bought firearms right after watching the story? That story tells you not only can the police not protect you, the police aren't obligated to protect you, and the police aren't enthusiastic about protecting you. You can't think of a more extreme case of now's a time for action than a bunch of kids being shot up in an elementary school with the police standing right outside with full knowledge of it. So you're about to get your defund the police. but it's not going to be on the basis of racial injustice. See, when we did that, one thing about black folks, we know when something ain't black folks, right? When we started seeing all the spray cans of all cops are bastards on walls and shit during the protest, we knew that was white folks. When we started seeing bricks show up around glass windows and stuff where there were no brick buildings, just a perfect stacked area of bricks, we knew that was white folks. When we started seeing calls to defund the police, we knew that was white folks. Niggas don't say defund the police. Niggas say fuck the police. Now, if you would saw signs of fuck the police, we'd have been like, okay, yeah, that was black folks. That was black folks. You're a news reporter and you're talking shit about the black community and somebody drive by and smack you with an empty bottle of Hennessy. Yeah, that was black folks. We did that. That's our calling card. But defund the police was a last ditch effort. I told you, Republicans and Democrats are really the same party. They really work together. They need the people to be at each other's throats. But in reality, they work on one accord. And you can see it every time when it comes to core issues. Foreign policy, economics, law enforcement at home. Those big three, you'll see Democrats and Republicans become interchangeable, indistinguishable, and in lockstep with one another. The phrase defund the police was a phrase intentionally brought up by white folks in the Democratic Party in an effort to make police reform, which was the word people normally use. It was an effort to make police reform a non-starter. And as I've said before, non-starter is white people speak for get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. We're not even going to start the conversation. You come in here talking defund the police. All right, well, I'm going to head out because you're not talking serious. Defund the police was something that was said to put a picture in people's heads like we were just going to start closing police departments left and right all throughout the country. Couple that with images and stories of police having to leave. See, here's what they really did. And watch the trick bag right here. They told you that the Democratic Party was going to defund the police. They never passed a single law that defunded any police. They never passed a single law that did any of that. And not only did they do that, this is where political capital comes in. They never passed a law that defunded a single police office. What they did, and they never passed a law that defunded or reduced a police force based on racial injustice or any kind of moral injustice. What they did that everybody conveniently forgets, that I keep pointing out, is they got rid of a whole lot of cops based on vaccine mandates. No one talks about that. The biggest exodus in the police forces all across America had nothing to do with racial injustice. You had some cops that were retiring and leaving and transferring on their own because their rap sheets were so bad and so horrendous that they knew during the George Floyd protest, they were going to start looking at police misconduct records. So a lot of them left the force to get out of the way of what they thought was coming. But no rule ever came that said, hey, Bill, we looked at your police misconduct record and it's totally out of whack. We're going to let you go. Not one single cop was let go for that during the height of the George Floyd protest. Not one single cop. Certainly nothing to create some mass reduction in police force. What ended up happening, the biggest reduction in police force came from vaccine mandates. So I want you to notice that I pointed this out to black folks when it was happening. I said, take a look at all the cops that they keep telling you they couldn't do nothing about and they couldn't get rid of and they couldn't fire because of police unions. Take a look at how all that shit went right out the window, and you can either get the shot or you can get the fuck out. Them police unions couldn't do shit, which lets you know that they could have did something like this if they wanted to. If they wanted to turn around and say, we're purging all these police with bad misconduct records. We're purging all these dirty cops and putting them on a permanent ban list, like you get banned from flying. You could never become a cop again. And this is going easy on you because we could just arrest your ass. You can never become a cop again. You have shown that you do not have the makeup. You do not have the mental capacity nor the moral capacity to enforce any goddamn laws in this country. We could easily do that. And the police unions would easily bow. But they choose not to do that. But they did that shit for a vaccine. They said, damn all that thin blue line, protect the blue. You gonna take this shot or you can go. And many of them decided to go. That is the reason for your reduced police forces all across America. Had nothing to do with any kind of fake wokeness. But that's the narrative that white people feed their white followers, is that we had a good thing going with all these dirty cops and this police racket and keeping those niggers over there in line. But then those damn niggers went and complained about it and started all this woke shit just because we choke one nigger to death and they all get scared, right? And now all of a sudden we got to do all this anti-police, defund the police shit. It's not at all what happened. You killed George Floyd live on air. We kicked over some tables and set some shit on fire. We got it out of our system. They gave us a Black Lives Matter street sign for like a week, and then they cleaned it up and put a Gay Lives Matter street sign up. We didn't get shit from that. And not one police officer got fired, not even the cops that were involved. All three of those cops that were involved in goddamn George Floyd's murder are still working beats right now. They got ongoing trials, but they ain't lost no damn jobs. If Derek Chauvin gets out in his lifetime, they'll have an office job waiting for him at the local precinct. Ain't nobody lost their job. Even the people that lost their freedom didn't lose their job. Amber Geiger can get out in a year and a half or something and go apply at the exact same police force. And she'll be working the exact same job with the exact same badge number and the exact same gun. The gun she shot both of them John with. They'll give it right back. Welcome back, Amber. Bitch was working at a TGI Fridays a few weeks before becoming a cop, and y'all gave her a badge, a gun, and a license to kill. They had no problem firing all these police officers over vaccine mandates. So we don't want to hear that bullshit when it comes to firing police over police misconduct. It's been a racket since time immemorial. It's been a racket. And it was about to work again. Joe Biden was going to be able to pivot on black people and say, I'm going to give them funding and I'm going to do this and that and I'm going to refund the police. And he was going to think that he was going to be able to run on, I got the niggers in my back pocket and I support the police. I can have it both ways. And now something like this happens that makes white folks look at the police. See, you put yourself in a very, very precarious pickle because now you got white folks looking at police from a fiscal standpoint. And that gets the left and the right's attention. The left can't defend you because the left has been using you as an argument for why you don't need to have so many goddamn guns. What do you need guns for? We live in a safe society. We got police. Oh, the police won't do shit. You got police officers telling teachers in certain states and certain cities, yeah, it's best you just carry a gun. Now the police look pointless. Not only controversial, but pointless. The right can't use it because the right is the biggest back the blue, no matter who, thin blue line supporting people. They'll back the police up during a crime. But they can't support cowardice. That shit don't fly. So you've messed it up for yourself by exposing yourself now. Now you got white folks looking at defund the police from a fiscal standpoint now. And if they're going to be looking at it from a fiscal standpoint, what's going to happen is you're not going to get no fanfare. You're not going to get no big announcement of all cops are bastards and defund the police. White folks will just look at that and change that in a small proposition. And they'll use the proper language. Do you support police reform? Do you support revamping the configuration of the police departments across America? They're not going to say defund the police. They're going to defund the police. But see, when white folks actually intend to do something, they're not like black folks. They don't name their organizations what they intend to do in the organization. They don't name the organization. You know, we name shit the Fred Hampton Freedom Black Panther Defense Party of Get Back at You Crackers. And they see us coming from a mile away. White folks don't name their shit the Black Genocide Organization. They call it Planned Parenthood. They call it the Bilderberg Group, the Osmark Association. Just some generic professional sounding shit that little do you know is an organization hell bent on your destruction. But they'll never tell you. In fact, they'll name shit the opposite of what they do. The misinformation department. Like they'll name the Department of Defense, and it's the War Department, right? The Ministry of Truth. They'll name shit damn near the opposite of what it intends to do and what it's made for. And we'll be none the wiser. So when white folks are planning on defunding the police, and they are planning on defunding the police, they're not going to name it that. They're going to call it police reform. The police know it. The police were trying to pump up a narrative that there was a growing, creeping crime wave to justify the existence of police. You see, white folks are starting to realize if you're not here to protect us, but you're over there looking like an army, and we're arming you, why? We're arming you to be cowards, but you niggas look like stormtroopers. See, the police to white people, again, we're not talking about black folks. To white people, the police are starting to look like the redcoats pre-revolutionary times. They're starting to look like they're here to keep you in and not to keep problems out. Police are just grunts. They'll do whatever for a check. They don't have no patriotism or connection. All that protect and serve talk and all that little tough guy, that's just shit they say. Talking about these colors don't run, but you hiding behind the squad car because that dude with the AR-15 is scary, right? White folks are starting to see you for what you are. When you're not the nigger whipping machine, you don't really have much of a use. Police are here for niggers. That's the one thing they're good at, is bashing niggers around. And even that's becoming costly. It's bad optics now. You know what else is bad optics? 20 police standing around like some bitches while a guy with an AR-15 kills people's kids inside of a school. Now, what black people need to do in order to take advantage of this, and you know I like giving instructions on stuff that's real easy. You see how smooth the midterm plan's going, and you haven't had to lift a finger. What black people need to do with this event is shut up. Don't say, hasn't this been easy following my instructions? You don't even got to do anything. Don't say anything. Let police reform happen. You are about to get a reduction in shitty cops. White folks, white people on their own are going to start reviewing the records of all these police and weeding out all the shitty cops. There's going to be a process for reviewing cops' misconduct, for reviewing a cop's character. They're going to introduce, and remember I said this so that when it happens, you're going to be like, that nigga was right. They're going to introduce, because this is how white folks are, let's just call this a grading scale. They'll name it something white, like a scale of excellence or a scale of valor or some shit, but it's just going to be a report card. Police are going to start having report cards where we see what kind of cop you are. We see how much bullshit's on your record. And those good cops are going to get moved off into white good areas. The shitty cops are going to remain in the black areas. If we don't do anything. Let this reform happen. One of the key things with reform with the police is going to be they're going to start grading cops. Cops are going to start having report cards, credit scores, if you will. And once that system has been introduced, like I just said, all the good cops are going to go to the nice white neighborhoods. All the shitty ones are going to go to the black neighborhoods. But this time, what we have now at our advantage is we have a way to quantify these shitty cops. See, right now, when we go and we tell white folks, we go tell our government, we go petition and go, we want better cops. Okay, what's that mean? How do we measure better cops with no system of how we measure the cops? Well, we're going to wait the following year and see how many officer-involved shootings these cops committed? Like how are we going to do that? But under this new grading system, if we go to our government and petition and say, every single cop in this department has a police score below 5. That's unacceptable. And it contributes to our high crime rate with these police officers' inability to solve, prevent crimes, deal with members of the community. I mean, their records, their grades speak for themselves. We need to start getting better cops in our city, in our district, that are at least a 7. We need at least 7s and up. See, once that grading system gets introduced, that's going to start affecting officers' pay. You want to see that thin blue line evaporate into nothingness? You want to see police officers start selling each other out and snitching each other out and completely change the culture of the police force overnight? Start tying pay to performance. Start tying pay to performance. And them niggas won't be loyal to each other at all. This is how you take advantage of spectacle. See, the last thing you want to do is to start blacking this conversation up, because then that'll remind white folks why they have the police, for your ass. And once you reintroduce race into the subject, white folks will magically tolerate any indignity, any inconvenience, and any suffering, up to and including murder of their offspring, if it can maintain a social hierarchy over you. You don't understand how important that is to them. It's literally what defines whiteness, is not being a black person and not being treated like a black person. So the second you come in talking about Leroy, who got shot by the cops, they're cool with that. They're mad that their kids got shot by the cops. That's the cops fucking up. The cops are supposed to shoot Leroy. So sit back and let white folks battle each other out for a minute, because you're going to be a major beneficiary once the dust settles. Let them create this code of standards by which the cops got to live by. And the second that they do that, you use that code of standards, you use that grading system to point out how the cops in your neighborhood are not up to par. A big part of white supremacy's power is denial, is the ability to make something be there while denying its existence. A grading system eliminates the ability for them to deny how inept, how corrupt, how messed up the police are. Imagine Precinct 77 in Los Angeles County, the notorious police department for the Rampart scandal, right now being investigated for police gangs. Imagine if that police department, if all the officers in that police department had a grading system. And you want this grading system to follow around each cop individually. You want any police department that takes on potential officers with low grading scores to be affected by their funding. See, they do this with climate change. They say, okay, countries that produce a lot of pollution, we can't stop you from producing a lot of pollution, but what we can do is we can give you a cap. You're allowed to produce this much of this pollutant per year. Anything beyond this cap, you got to pay a fee for. Guess what that does to a lot of countries? It makes them curb their damn enthusiasm when it comes to pollution. Now, does it work on the bigger countries like the USA and China? No, because they're superpowers. But a vast majority of the countries on the planet are not superpowers, right? So everybody else got to play by the rule, or they got to pay the troll toll. You do that with police departments. Hey, every individual police officer's score contributes to your department's overall score. If you as a department go below this score, this affects your funding from the state and city by this much. That thin blue line is gone the next day. Do you know how many cops, how many chiefs of police will be sitting there about to bring on some officer and, okay, we'll bring you. Oh, hey, Bob, it looks like it says here that your overall officer score is a 5. Can you explain you got some kind of incidents going on right now that would bring that score down? Oh, you shot Tamir. Oh, no, we can't take you on. You'll end up lowering the whole department's score and cost us money. I'm sorry. I wish we could take you. You set up a system like that, which they're planning to do. Now these types of cops, they become pariahs. They become persona non grata, which is white people speak for nobody fucks with you. It directly affects me and my pocketbook to take you on. All that brotherhood shit go right out the window when you start messing with people's money. That's how we can take advantage of this situation and gain ground politically. Sometimes you got to sit back and be silent. Black folks, we always kind of want to be heard and seen and taken seriously, which is natural. But sometimes in politics, you got to understand when and when not to play your hand. This is a perfect time to sit back and let white folks fight this one out. Let these white folks do our fight for us. They can get further with this than we can, doing the same things we want to do. What does it matter to us if the police get defunded based on general incompetence versus racial injustice? If you came in right now trying to add on racial injustice, these white folks that are complaining from an ineptitude standpoint, These white folks that are frustrated with the police inability to get the job done, they'll swallow their pride and tolerate that fuckery because you've just reminded them what the primary job of the cops is, which is to protect them from niggas. This is a very sad story involving people's children. And I don't know if I said it at the top of the show, but I want to make sure I say this now. I don't take this lightly. You know, I'm normally pretty jovial about my episodes and making jokes and stuff. I'm trying really hard not to do that because this is a very, very sad event. We all got kids. And it's got to be a nightmare for any parent of any color to have to face something like that, and let alone when trying to go save your kid, you got some assholes working harder to stop you than to stop the killer. Imagine you chasing somebody who stole your kid or something like that, and somebody tackles you to the ground and holds you so the motherfucker can get away. You got the police threatening to hit media members with obstruction of justice lawsuits for talking about what happened. You got the police in probably the ultimate case of thin blue line syndrome. You got the Uvalde School District Police calling other local police to protect them because, remember, this is white folks. They got nothing to do with black folk. The white people in that city are calling that police department and dropping threats. And from the sounds of it, some of them are trying to make good on them threats. Remember what I said at the top of the show about deep down, white folks don't respect the law or them cops neither. They just understand that they're a means to an end. And when they're no longer providing that means, it's time for that relationship to end. White folks done got no problem getting straight up violent with the police. None at all. They're perturbed about this, understandably so. So that's all I'm going to say on this matter as far as this particular shooting, how it relates to law enforcement in general, and how black people can benefit politically. Because we always have to be looking at whenever there's a spectacle event, whenever there's some big event, whenever there's some big thing, understand that is somehow going to translate into policy change. War in Ukraine, policy. We're going to send some money over there. We're going to allow Ukrainians to come over here in droves. Migrant caravan, we're going to open up the floodgates. We're going to give these people this money. We're going to blah, 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 blah. There's policy behind all of it. And whenever something big happens like this, we as black people need to be figuring out how we can translate that spectacle into narrative and that narrative into policy that benefits us. That's the tactic. Signing out.
With the benefit of hindsight, stand by, right? I got it. Okay. Hey, for the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision. Period. There's no excuse for that.
Thank you for doing this, and I do hope you stay here and take as many questions as possible. You say there were 19 officers gathered in the hallway or somewhere. What efforts were made to try and break through that door? You say it was locked. What efforts were the officers making to try and break through either that door or another door to get inside that classroom?
None at that time. The on-scene commander at the time believed that it had transitioned from an active shooter to a barricaded subject.
So there were 19 cops standing outside of the door of those classrooms where those kids were being murdered, where they were bleeding to death, in desperate need of medical care. They did not even try to breach the door. And as you see, I mean, they can't even defend it.
Yeah, they're just
they
admitting
can't
it
even try to
outright.
defend it.
Same guy who was super triumphant, you know, the day after. He's like, law enforcement.
Thank you to law enforcement.
And he's also
quick
the one who
response.
lied to all of us, Crystal, Steve McCraw. He's the director of Texas Public Safety. He said that there was an active shooter that there was a school resource officer who engaged that shooter. What do we know now? So resource officer's not even on the scene.
And that's just one. I can't even keep track of all the lies now in this story.
Right.
But that one example of what the hell was happening with the school resource officer, we literally got 4 different versions of the story. First, the school resource officer was there on the scene. He was chasing. They exchanged gunfire. Then he chased him into the building, but there was no gunfire. Then, well, he didn't chase him into the building, but he was there. And then finally we come to learn he wasn't even there at the school. I mean, that's just one example of the lies that we were told about this thing from the beginning. And so there's a little bit of a sense that they've realized they've screwed this thing up so badly that they can't do anything else but admit, yeah, maybe we should have gone in and not waited an hour. And by the way, they would have waited longer.
Oh,
But
yeah,
the Border
that's right.
Patrol finally said, screw this, we're going in and we're taking this guy
Thank God for
out.
those guys, seriously.
But
Yeah.
because we've been lied to so much about this response, I certainly don't feel like even now we have the whole story. Various news outlets, and I'll get to this in just a minute, have been trying to piece together based on eyewitness accounts, videos that were posted online, surveillance footage, what the authorities are actually saying, trying to piece together the timeline of how and when this all went down. And the details are just unconscionable. But, you know, maybe one of the most honest things we heard out of all of the spin is the real reason they didn't go in. Why? They were afraid that they were going to get shot. This is a spokesperson with the Texas Department of Public Safety being pressed on CNN. Take a listen.
Correct. The active shooter situation, you want to stop the killing, you want to preserve life, but also one thing that, of course, the American people need to understand is that officers are making entry into this building. They do not know where the gunman is. They are hearing gunshots. They are receiving gunshots. At that point, if they proceeded any further, not knowing where this suspect was at, they could have been shot. They could have been killed. And at that point, that gunman would have the opportunity to kill other people inside that school.
Everything else is just spin and rationalization. They were scared. That's the bottom
they were
line.
afraid. You're going to be going deep into your monologue, which is that they violated the basic tenets of active shooter training.
Yes.
They tell you, no matter what, if you are the first person on the scene, even if you were the only person on the scene, they say in no uncertain terms, you have to put your life on the line in order to save children. And I really hope, look, I put this out there, which is I'm sympathetic to anybody who doesn't want to do that. But that's a decision to make before you become a cop, not after you become the cop. And federal agents basically have to mount, a coup against the on-site commander and say, you know what, you're full of it, we're all going in. And that timeline you alluded to came out yesterday. Let's put this up there on the screen where they talk about 78 long minutes. And this thing, guys, I mean, it is brutal to read because it just goes minute by minute. It shows videos and it shows quotes of police officers who are keeping parents out of the school. You have parents who are begging the police officers in order to go in. They describe the multiple long minutes, somewhere around 40 minutes, Crystal, that 19 officers were in the hallway being held up before being able to go inside. I mean, the one I just can't get out of my head is this little girl who's inside the classroom who makes 3 separate 911 calls in which she asks and says, please send the police in. She can hear the police ask them to come in. Also, there's a report now that actually from one of the children who was in the room, just to give you an idea of how screwed up the situation is that they said, hey, if anybody needs help, yell help. Kid yells help. Gunman is still alive, comes over and shoots that kid and actually kills him. So you have a botched response, not only in terms of the initial contact, it is clear also that the holdup on that cost lives. That's one of the spin that they're going to try and put out there. It's like, well, everybody was already dead. Apparently that was the justification for the on-site commander. Now, I did some digging into this on-site commander. It is not the Uvalde Police Department. Uvalde ISD, Independent School District, has its own police department.
Right.
The chief of that police department, which has 6 officers, yes, 6, basically very inexperienced, that was the guy who was in charge, and he's the one who made all these idiot calls and held up Border Patrol and all these other tactical units from even going on inside. So clearly he's, not just a fool.
Well,
I mean, frankly, I think he should go to prison, but I don't know if the laws work that way.
Also, interesting side note, he actually was just elected to the city council, that dude.
Oh my God.
And I don't think he's been sworn in yet, but yeah, he's elected to the city council. And while certainly the bulk of the blame falls on him, since he made that decision, making this excuse of, oh, it's not an active shooter anymore, this is more akin to a hostage situation, and we just assumed everybody was dead. Well, you're getting 911 calls from the room. One little girl, as you mentioned multiple times, but there were multiple phone calls placed from inside that room saying, please help us. So for a fact there are people who are alive in that room. Not to mention, God, the reports are so horrific to imagine. One little girl who survived by smearing herself in the blood of her friends and pretending to be dead. The friend she was laying on top of was initially breathing, and then because the response was so long and she's unable to get medical care, she died. You had kids who might have been saved who bled out on that classroom floor because from that timeline, the gunman entered the building at 11:33. 2 minutes later, 3 police officers enter. They don't take him out until 12:50, an hour and 20 minutes. And as you said, Sagar, their training guidance that they're supposed to be following, that they were well trained on.
And did, very
They had multiple recent active shooter drills. This school system had all the latest in terms of surveillance technology. They had dedicated additional resources to this school district police department, 6 officers across all of their schools. The very first thing that manual tells you is the number one goal is stop the killing. They say in no uncertain terms, because of the nature of this response, because of how important it is that you stop the killing of innocent civilians as quickly as possible, it is very likely you may be the only one on the scene.
Yep.
Well, here they were lucky. They had 3 police officers there, and still they don't act. That revelation that they did not even try to get in the door, I just don't even know what to say about that.
And, the one story I really can't get my head around is there's that woman who was a mother who was placed in handcuffs, by federal marshals on the scene. Then she was, let go. Then she had time to run into the school. Well, it turns out she wasn't just some local mom. Crystal, she heard about the shooting, drove 40 miles. So she had the time to hear about the shooting, drive 40 miles, get placed in handcuffs, get out of handcuffs, run into the school, save her own kids. Well, I don't know what the hell these federal marshals are doing, all during the time before this gunman is actually killed by police. So you have now verified, by the way, a father was tased by police officers for trying to go get his own kids. A mom was placed in handcuffs by federal marshals. Also, these feds, what are you doing? Once again, you guys are on scene keeping moms out of the school to go get their own kids because apparently you're not doing a good enough job of that. And also this gunman is still alive during this entire time.
Yes. Well, and here's the thing. The reason the parents were so desperate to go in and get is because they weren't doing anything.
Yeah, they knew. They could see it.
If you are actively engaged in trying to take this guy, I can understand you don't want parents coming in and interfere. Of course, because not safe for them. It confuses the situation. But when you're standing around 19 dudes in the hallway doing jack shit, yeah, of course, if you're a parent, of course, you're going to do everything you can to go in and get your kids. And how about this detail that was also revealed? So not only is the school resource officer not exchanging gunfire with the gunman going in, not actually there on site whatsoever, when he arrives, he chased a teacher that he was confused, thought was the shooter, which also shows you, I don't know if you had a school resource officer in your high school growing up. I did as well. He knew all of us. He was there every day. We all had, a relationship. He certainly knew all the teachers. So I continue to have a lot of questions. Another question I have is, the gunman shoots his grandmother in the face. She and the neighbors call 911. That house was very close to the school. School
Apparently
system
she used
should
to work at the school too.
Immediately locked down. When you have a gunman on the loose within a mile of the school, that should have been an immediate lockdown. So I have a question about that as well. There is so much here still I think that is being covered up and that we don't know. I mean, there is so much here still, I think that is being covered up and that we don't know.
I mean, there is so much here still, I think, that is being covered up and that we don't know.